California's Big July quakes has put strains on a major fault. This is the latest USGS survey, Southern California Earthquake Center study. The earthquakes had hammered the Southern California desert near the town of Ridgecrest later summer, involving ruptures. A web of interconnecting faults, an increased strain on a major nearby fault, has begun to slowly move. This is according to a new study. Now we know that the Golet fault is the second largest fault in California. The first, of course, is the San Andreas. The Golet fault is perpendicular to San Andreas, basically leading from Los Angeles to Ridgecrest, and it's basically locked with San Andreas. And it seems that the weak point was at Ridgecrest that gave on July 4th and 5th. But that's not the first time that we had a 7.1 earthquake at Ridgecrest. We also had one 20 years ago. And something very similar happened this time around as what happened 20 years ago. Now, in 2015 actually, more recently than 20 years ago, 2015, we had an earthquake of 6.2 north of Vancouver Island, Canada, and 24 hours later, we had a moderate earthquake in Ridgecrest. Now this year, 2019, we had a 6.2 magnitude earthquake north of Vancouver Island, Canada, and 13 hours later, we had the foreshock of 6.4 on July 4th morning. And the next day we had the 7.1 on Friday, July 5th in Ridgecrest as well. So it seems that Ridgecrest there on the Golet fault was the weak point where the pressure was relieved. The west coast, of course, is a subduction zone, and San Andreas fault takes about 75% of the subduction pressure. The Walker Lane fault system, which is parallel to San Andreas towards the east, going from southeast to northwest, just as San Andreas is going, takes about the other 25% of the subduction pressure. And we know that the Ridgecrest earthquake was at the edge of the Walker Lane fault system. Walker Lane fault system is not one fault, it's a series of faults that acts as one fault. And this is where these faults activated on July 4th and 5th, and they're still active now, with tens of thousands of earthquakes since then. And it happens also to be in a volcanic field, the Caltech volcanic field. And the Walker Lane fault system also houses most of the high-threat volcanoes of California, and it's a system that nudges towards the Cascade Arc. It wants to go northwest, and it nudges up towards the north, pushing the Cascades Arc. So, the Golet fault basically sits between San Andreas and the Walker Lane fault system, making a type of a U-shape. Now, the ruptures in the Ridgecrest earthquakes sequence ended a few miles from Golet fault. It runs east-west for 185 miles from the San Andreas to the Death Valley. And the Golet fault has been relatively quiet for the past 500 years and now began a process called fault creep. It slipped 0.8 inches since July. This is what the USGS research says. The study of geophysicists from California, Caltech, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and geologists published the journal Science lately on Thursday, and it was coinciding with the implementation of statewide earthquake and early warning system for the general public. Southern California's largest earthquake sequence in 2 decades began July 4th. 2 decades meaning 20 years, because the last time we had a 7.1 was exactly 1999, as I said many times in the past concerning Ridgecrest. And that earthquake of 7.1 in 1999 again in the summer, caused quake swarms in Yellowstone, as well as quake swarms in Long Valley Caldera, which again there also houses a geothermal plant, the Casa Diablo. Now, Southern California's largest earthquake sequence in 20 years began July 4th with the 6.4 magnitude about 10:30 p.m. Actually, it was also on the day that they were trying the early warning system for the Quake app. And that's the exact day the earthquake did take place. Coincidence? I don't know. And then that was the foreshock for the 7.1 that took place the day later in the evening of Friday, July 5th. It's in the Mojave Desert, about 120 miles north of Los Angeles. The magnitude 6.4 was a foreshock, followed by the 7.1 main shock, and over 100,000 aftershocks, and they're still going on. Now, the assistant professor of geophysics at Caltech is Zachary Ross. He's the lead author of the paper, and in the statement he said it was one of the most well-documented earthquake sequences in history. He developed automated computer analysis of the seismo data to detect the huge number of aftershocks since then, with precise location information. GPL scientists mapped surface ruptures of the faults with data from Japanese and European Space Agency satellite radars. He says, I was surprised to see how much complexity there was and the number of faults that ruptured. This is what Eric Fielding, co-author of the study, also said. About 20 previously unknown crisscrossing faults were involved in all this. 20 that were unknown. Ross said the 6.4 earthquake also broke at the same time faults at right angles to each other. And he said this was, of course, surprising. It was a commonly held idea that earthquakes are caused by ruptures of a single long fault, but this earthquake took place with various faults simultaneously breaking at right angles to each other. Something bizarre. So, it was not caused by a single long fault, but it was has been reconstructed since the 1992 quake in the desert near Landers, California, which ruptured several faults. Now, the Ridgecrest sequence also had evidence of more complex processes. Ross said it's going to force people to think hard about how we quantify seismic hazard and whether our approach to defining faults needs to change. We can't just assume that the larger faults dominate the seismic hazard if many smaller faults can link up to create these major quakes. It's exactly what happened in this case. This study was published on the 30th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, and that badly damaged San Francisco Bay Area. As we know, the San Francisco Bay Area is a lot of landfill, very soft. Liquefaction takes place there in strong earthquakes. The 1906 earthquake that took place there only had about 200,000 people living there. They had such a tremendous devastation. Today, there are over 8 million people living there, and most of them live and work in landfill of the Bay Area, which means that it's going to have liquefaction. It's going to act almost like quicksand. Now, Governor Newsom formally announced on this occasion the launch of the nation's first statewide earthquake early warning system. This was what was being tested on the morning of July 4th when the foreshock of 6.4 struck. And a lot of people had that app. They were using it on a test basis. A lot of them did not get notification of the 6.4 earthquake, which they felt a lot of shaking of, even in Los Angeles. I guess they strengthened the weaknesses, and now it's ready to go out to help people. They can have a 1.5 to 2.1 second warning before a major strong earthquake. in order to have enough seconds, two seconds or so, to take cover. Actually, it catches, I guess, the P waves before the S waves come in from the main shock. Now, alerts also were made available to schools, government agencies, industries, but not to the general public, except in Los Angeles County, where an app-based system has been in use since January. The Shake Alert system has been under development by the U.S. Geological Survey and science institutions for years, and will now push alerts to cell phones through this app developed by University of California at Berkeley and the Wire Emergency Alert System. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.